So, hello, I'm Leslie Clayton,
Hello.
and I'm the founder of the Joyous Heart Network. I'm here with Anyaa McAndrew, who is a facilitator for women in her work for healing, for healing sexual trauma, but so much more. Anyaa McAndrew is a priestess facilitator and a high priestess facilitator, and I've worked with Anyaa for several years. I met her when I was on an awakening journey. And in my awakening process, I found the priestess process, which, unbeknownst to me, has been one of the most profound sexual healing processes. I came to it for other reasons, for spiritual reasons, for connection, and it gave me so much more. Thank you, Anyaa, for being here and for being such an important part of my team, my village of healers.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, you're welcome. Would you tell us a little bit more about your background? You recently wrote an email that was so powerful and sharing some of your history of what brought you to this current place we're in and this Me Too movement right now. And but just to back it up, how long you've been working with women?
Yeah, for about 43 years. I got my master's degree in counseling in 1976. But before that, out of undergraduate school, I just found myself being hired as a juvenile probation officer in a detention home for runaways, and seeing what was, talking to these runaways and finding out that they were actually running away from, a lot of them were running away from sexual abuse.
Wow.
And it blew my mind because I really didn't have a clue about what to do, how to be with them. Nobody else seemed to be noticing anything. This was in the early 70s, like 73. And so I would take the stories home with me at night, and I would, I was just kind of in this restless place of what can I do except to listen to these kids. And so eventually I was prompted to go back to get a master's degree. So I got a master's degree in counseling. And then my first job after my master's degree was as a community education coordinator. I'm going to turn off my email here.
Okay.
Community education coordinator for a newly staffed rape crisis center in Springfield, Illinois, called Rape Information and Counseling Service. And so then, fresh out of counseling school, I was thrust into classrooms talking to teenagers about rape and sexual abuse, and also men's groups.
Okay.
That was challenging, talking to men's groups like Elks clubs and Rotary clubs, about rape.
I just have a question about that. Did they ask you to come talk about that subject, or?
I cannot remember, but I think it was just sort of part of the circuit,
Okay.
And I also put out a newsletter. So, for a young woman in her, mid 20s, to have to do this. I mean, it really pushed me. It really stretched me. And then at the same time, the women that we were getting coming through the Rape Crisis Center, it just became really, really clear what was going on. That there had been childhood abuse. There'd been, it's sort of like, they were carrying that vibration with them, and that vulnerability, and that history of being a victim, and that was setting them up for all kinds of things. And I'm sure that it's the same kind of thing now that sets women up for sexual trafficking, although I think sexual trafficking has been going on for a long, long time, and we just didn't know anything about it. Right. These same women would get into prostitution, were the kids that ran away from home and would end up on the streets. So I learned a lot. And then from there, actually the woman who hired me, who's one of my best friends of about 43 years. We met about the same time that I started my, or I graduated from my master's degree, Judith Corbin Blackburn, who's also a brilliant therapist and works with, all kinds of issues. And also lives next door to me. She and I and another woman started a counseling collective. And, collectives were big in the 70s. This was the time of the women's movement. This was the time of what I call, what we call the second wave feminism. First wave feminism was the suffragette movement, right? Second wave feminism was the feminism of the 70s and the 80s. So it was an interesting process, because part of what happened in our counseling collective is that women came to us who were part of the women's community, part of the political feminist movement of the time. And we were also really waking up spiritually. So all of us, the three of us, were waking up spiritually, or had been in the process of waking up spiritually. And so we were very interested in women's spirituality. We were interested in the goddess. We brought one of our claims to fame was that we brought the first witch to Springfield, Illinois, to do a women's goddess workshop with us. This was in the mid-70s.
Wow.
And so women would come to us from the feminist community, and we would hear gossip about us that, they really liked our work, but we weren't really political because we were spiritual. And then the women from the spiritual community would come to us, and they would come to us for work, and they would say they aren't really spiritual because they're political.
Oh, okay.
So those days, and I've really married that in my work. And I think it's really important. I think it's a key piece around healing.
Thank you. Yeah.
That we have to bring in the spiritual, because early sexual abuse, from my perspective and from the perspective of my priestess teacher, Nicole Christine, who's no longer with us, she was a sexual abuse survivor. And from the time she was born, her mother died in childbirth. And so her story, if you haven't read it, Leslie, read Under Her Wings, The Making of a Magdalene by Nicole Christine.
Thank you. I have the book.
She talks about it. And it was very much a part of what she talked about in my circle with her, the very first circle that, that I brought to Atlanta. That one of the things I learned from Nicole, having learned about Tantra and sacred sexuality, having learned about rape and early sexual abuse, and then moving into priestess work, is that from her perspective, early sexual abuse was an initiation. It was it can be seen as an initiation if there is the consciousness and the work to go with it. In other words, as women wake up in consciousness, they can begin to see that all of their experiences, even those experiences of early childhood abuse, are part of her spiritual story. Yeah. So it's a really, really important piece. And I'll just stop there and see if there's any particular direction you want to go with that.
Well, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask. I wanted to see if you could, because I found that to be true when I was going through the priestess process. I never realized how related when I told my spiritual story, how intertwined the sexual story was. That's interesting to me. So I wonder if there's more you can say about that for someone who may be listening who's still in a lot of pain or suffering, or that could help to bridge that relationship. It's a split that happens in the...
Yes, it is a split that happens, and any kind of trauma creates a split. And the healing process has to be, as you know, Leslie, it has to be holistic.
Yeah.
It has to be about the body. It has to be, we have to work with our emotions, we have to work with our beliefs, but we also have to invite in spirit. We have to invite in our higher self, our higher power, and whatever it is that we think of as spiritual, because that split happens between the mind and the body, between the body and the emotions, between the spirit, especially if, there was any religious abuse going on, or, some people have been abused by teachers. Those teachers or authority figures as children were our higher selves. We didn't have higher selves. We looked up to the adults. We looked up to the authority figures in our lives. So if you were abused by a teacher or by even a parent, there's going to be a split there between, how you think about spirit, how you think about God is all there is.
Yes.
And so that split really also needs to heal. And so, I guess my suggestion is, and of course this is the way I've always worked, is that there has to be that recognition of all 4 levels for real healing to happen. Yeah. And then there are some women who want to go more onto a spiritual path, and I'm the creatrix of the shamanic priestess process, which works a little more into the realm of shadow, into the realm of the wounded feminine, because that's been my domain my whole life. So tools like, shamanic breath work, I bring into the process. And of course, I know you interviewed Linda Starwolf, and those shamanic practices allow us to go into an altered state in a safe way in order to not only access body memories, but emotional memories and all kinds of threads that then we can start weaving back together. And, I'm sure that Starwolf talked a lot about breath work and how breath work can really help. There's also work I do, which is right, left brain work, and it's called EMDR, and that's really helpful as well. Right. Actually, I was just, working with I do personal intensives with clients, rather than, because I live in the mountains, women will come to me and they'll stay with me for 3 days up to a week, and we'll work with those traumas in a very specific way to reprocess them. Okay, to reprocess them, because what happens is there are blockages or crystallizations that happen in certain parts of the brain, and those memories need to be reprocessed. Yes. The breath can do it, because the breath is the bridge between the mind and the body, the psyche and the spirit, the emotions and the mental. There's all kinds of ways that we can bridge those gaps that we have, those splits that we have. But for most of us in these times, talk therapy is not going to do it.
Yeah. And medication isn't where we want to go. So
yeah. And so, your path and the path of many women who have really woken up spiritually is different. It's different. It's much more innovative. It's much more about allowing ourselves to let go in a safe place into altered states, whether it's, dance and moving our bodies, or if it's breath work, or if it's ceremony, whatever it is that works, and whatever it is you're drawn to.
Thank you. Yeah, there's so many questions inside there. Like, oh yeah, I want to ask about that. So definitely the remembering the connection of the body through the dance, the breath work has been powerful. And one of the questions that I wanted to ask on this series of interviews that I'm doing with several people has to do with how magic can be so profound. And then there's this the spiral dynamics and the conversation of the like the Ken Wilber's conversations of philosophies. It's like we transcend and we include layers of consciousness.
Exactly.
And there's this layer of consciousness where we leave behind the old practices of the, the older. But as a priestess, the ritual and the magic of that, using the beliefs and the mind and the connection to the goddess, has been a profoundly real thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we're transcending and including through the spiral dynamics of consciousness, I wondered if you could say a little bit about that philosophy, the philosophies of that transcending and including what really is real. And it's magic.
Mm-hmm.
But some people would say we leave that behind.
Yeah. I prefer to use the word ceremony.
Yeah.
And ritual oftentimes, because there is a real there's a real experience for a certain percentage of sexual abuse survivors that comes from ritual abuse, and ritual can be ritual can be used to harm, and so I prefer to use ceremony. And I do feel like there are several different elements that we can bring into ceremony, but the ones that are most alive, of course, are the elements.
Yeah.
Okay, the earth, air, fire, water, the directions. Okay, because we still live in a 3D world, and we want to honor those 3D dimensions, and that's probably the easiest place to start when it comes to creating a ceremony. If I was to suggest that there be some way that a woman step into that, I would say that you would want to include the elements around you that you love, the things around you that you love, the beautiful objects, to create an altar. And altars have been around forever. And it's just a way of ceremonializing our intent, a place to focus. Mm-hmm. It's like a mandala, in breath work, when we create sacred art. And so, even though that's an ancient practice, we would include that as the modern priestess, as the present day priestess. We would include the idea of the altar and those things that are sacred to us on that altar, and our prayers. I just I learned when I did some work with Tamala Malay, who I hope you interview her at some point, but when I did some Akashic record work with her and she did my initial reading, she said, well, you have, and she talked about these lights that I have, and some are one color and some are another color, and it's like these are actual beings that go out and they deliver your prayers. they take your prayers out. And I'm like, I thought that was one of the coolest things about my Akashic records clearing. It was like, prayers do make a difference. There's actually beings assigned to us. There's little light beings assigned to us that take out our prayers.
Thank you for reminding me. I think she told me that too.
Yeah. So definitely, not only, including prayer and transcending to the higher levels of prayer, a higher understanding of prayer, not just praying to a being outside of ourselves, but also recognizing that we are huge, we're vast, we're multidimensional beings. We span the universe or the universes. And so when we pray, one of the transcend and include notions would be that we're actually asking our multidimensional self. We're asking ourselves, that part of us that lives in different places and is also connected to us, our aspects of our soul, to participate in our prayer.
Yeah.
And so we're not only recognizing and honoring 3D reality, but we're also going out from 3D reality and recognizing the other dimensions, and assuming that we don't just live here in this body. and that there is a part of us, and I would say this to survivors, that there is a part of us that chose to have this experience, to have the experience of our childhood or our trauma, in order to heal that and to make it the medicine that we carry, which is a shamanic term that is really about, I just got an email from Tamala. That the medicine that we carry is the healing that we've done on our own issues, that then gives us back the wisdom that we carry for others. And so as we walk through life, then we're paying it, we're continuing to pay it forward, which is, what you're doing with your not-for-profit. I mean, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Your work is a prayer. It is a ceremony. It's a continuous ceremony.
Yeah, I feel that way. It's very animated and alive with every day, the clients that I work with. I'm not working directly with healing sexual abuse and sexual trauma, but that's not my training. My training is to help people remember their body and build proprioception so they have more energy, more aliveness. And that's what the work has given me, like not just Pilates, the body awareness work that I do with Pilates, but the priestess process. It helped me remember me. It helped me remember my heart and remember the connection to the divine, and that I'm a sacred being. How wonderful. I forgot,
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is really, how we put those early traumatic experiences into context. But there's wisdom that says that we need to tell our story. And that was the piece in my newsletter that I sent out. The whole point was we need to tell our story.
Yeah.
We need to tell our story over and over and over again until we're done, and until it's integrated. It's not about, leaving our story behind, but our story, every time we tell it, is going to be about that transcending and including. It's going to be different every time we tell it. We're going to be telling it from a slightly different perspective and a slightly different self, because we continue to evolve.
Right. And the sacred space that you and the many priestess gatherings, the many priestess circles hold for all women and men. There's some that work with men and women. You particularly are working with women only. And that's one of the questions I did want to put some attention on, is that you chose to work with women in your circles only, where there's other priestess groups that work with men and women. And then there's men's group who work with just men, just as men, not necessarily about sexual healing, sexual abuse, although there are some that focus on that. Your choice to work with the frequency band of women was specific, and I wondered if you'd say something about it. It's not that you don't love men and want to be with men too and help men, and I'm just curious about the choice that you made for that.
I think my soul just guided me in that direction. Starting out working, coming up as a therapist in the feminist movement, and working with so many women, I just continually got guided to deepen that. And I do believe that, at a certain point in my life, it's probably about 15 years ago now, when I was living in Atlanta, I received a message from my soul that basically said, your awakening or enlightenment or your illumination will happen through the path of the feminine. And I feel like I've been mostly a feminine being. I'm a strong woman, but I'm primarily a feminine being. And I am continually working with my own masculine, and I love men. I'm heterosexual. I've been married 4 times. And what's interesting is that I am in a new relationship. It's about 5 months old. And this man is is a mirror to me, in the sense that he's a psychotherapist. He has his own school of astrology. He's a workshop leader, and he's an author. I'm not an author, but I write a lot. And we have already seen that we're going to be working together. And my next step beyond the priestess process is a sacred union process. Cool. So I will be working with him. Great. So my feeling has always been that men needed to do men's work with men.
I wanted to keep going. That's curious.
And women need to do women's work with women. And so I never, I was asked one time to do a solo process for Nicole when I was facilitating a priestess circle, because I'd taken my process out all over the world. And I was asked by Nicole to do a solo process with a man that she couldn't get to, who was in the Southwest or was in the Northwest. And I did that solo process with him. And so he became a priest in Nicole's lineage through me. And, he was already ordained. But that's the only man that I've worked with as in the priestess process. Okay. So it's my bias. I've just always felt like, that women should facilitate women's circles and men should facilitate men's circles, and that we're not about, men certainly need to access their feminine. Mm-hmm. That's a stage, David Data talks about the 3 stages of the masculine, the 3 stages of the feminine. And, that men need to consolidate their feminine, and then they need to reclaim their masculine. And women need to consolidate a healthy masculine, which is harder for women because we have this patriarchal model. So one of the things we work with in my priestess process is the inner patriarch. So we can know what the healthy masculine is within us, and we can know what the unhealthy masculine is, and we can tell the difference, because many women do not have a healthy masculine on board and really need to work with bringing a healthy masculine on board and understanding their own inner patriarch. That kind of work can't happen in mixed circles. It doesn't work so well. You can't go as deep, and I know that. So when women can do the work of getting a healthy masculine on board, which is what happens a lot of times for women that come into my circles, then the next step is to reintegrate their feminine. And for many years, I did do a sexual healing week long, because I have been Tantra trained. So I did that, and that really helps women to bring back their feminine. It was just for women only. It was sort of a Tantra for women, but it was really ended up being sexual healing focused. And so this next work is really going to be different. It's going to be how we mirror each other in terms of our inner masculine and our inner feminine, and what those processes are. And I can imagine that Yosef and I will probably be working separately. Like there may be time, I imagine these as retreats, and there may be a time when I'm working with the men and he's working with the women, and I'm working with the women and he's working with the men, but many times where we'll also be coming back together. So there's an evolution. This is the time of sacred marriage on the planet, but there still are a lot of women. I thought I would be complete with this, with the priestess process years ago. And I find myself doing probably 1 or sometimes 2 circles a year. And I'm doing an accelerated 10-day process for just 6 women starting at the end of March. And by the way, I have 2 openings left if there's anyone out there who's drawn to it. It's here at Isis Cove in the Smoky Mountains, and it is the complete priestess process and ends in ordination, because I'm a not-for-profit church as well, through Venus Rising. Wonderful. So does that answer your question in terms of that, that because the masculine feminine thing can be really confusing for us?
It can be. And I have had some friends in my conscious community that I've invited to come to a some women to come to a red tent to do some women's work. And the response I got was confusing to me, because someone says, oh no, I only go to groups that are inclusive of men and women. And I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I've enjoyed my experiences with the women. There's something different about the energetic, the quality of being with women only in the process of healing. And there's something different when I've never been in a men's group, but I'm imagining there's a different vibrational experience for men when it's just men. And then when I've done work with Heart IQ, with Christian Pankhurst, it's men and women, and that's delicious and it's wonderful, and I love that. And it's different, and and it's not about the ego and the mind. It's an energetic space. It's I can feel it. It's different. And I just wanted to, have you speak into, and you're speaking a little bit to it, like there's some technical work of developing the aspects of the inner masculine for a woman to do, and to be able to discover what is a healthy inner masculine versus the unhealthy ways that our cultural overlay has taught us to be. And it's very, very very,
and the patriarchy.
And
and the patriarchy has really, these last 5,000 to 6,000 years, has really has really created some weirdness. I don't, my shamanic astrology teacher, Daniel Gemario, and I, we take trips to the Gaelic lands, the Celtic lands every year. We take groups and we go to the stone circles, and we go to these Neolithic sites that are, 5,000 to 6,000 years old. And they existed pre-patriarchy. And, we always get a sense of this kind of, egalitarian guileny of the balance, the flow between the masculine and the feminine, that's really beautiful. We don't get that patriarchal split, so it really is a patriarchal thing, and a big part of what we're doing in the shamanic priestess process is really healing the patriarchy, how it has affected not only us, but it's affected men as well.
Yes.
And we could do a whole show just on that.
Yeah. Yes. There's so much more that's kind of bubbling up for me that I'd like to talk about, but I think that for now we'll go ahead and bring this interview to a close. But I'm going to reach out to you again for some questions that are kind of bubbling up around the childhood sexual abuse and the imbalance in pedophilia. Like, what is that? So I have some questions coming for you, but it need more time. So I will call you again if you are up for that.
Yes, thank you.
And
can I give people my website?
That's what I was going to ask you next. How do people find you?
Okay.
How can they find you? Yeah.
So it's pretty easy to find me. You don't even have to remember how to spell my name. It's just Goddess on the Loose. Goddess on the Loose.com.
Great.
So
lots of writing, lots of beautiful.
Thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you so much for everything that you've been to me and the way that you're holding space for so many women. See you soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.